Welcome to another quiet walk through the past. Tonight, we'll drift gently into a little explored corridor of history where marriage was not always a choice freely made, but rather a contest, a prize, an outcome determined not solely by love or alignment of families, but by skill, strength, wit, or fate. From the sunlit valleys of ancient Greece to the snow-laced plains of Scandinavia, from silent Japanese chambers inked with poetry to the galloping heart of the Mongolian steppe, the stories of bride contests are as diverse as the people who lived them. As always, this journey is not one of drama or urgency. Instead, we step slowly, letting the folds of time envelop us, listening to the quiet rustle of the past. So if your eyes are already growing heavy, that's perfectly fine. Close them, let your breathing soften. The story will still be here, unfolding like an old letter, line by line. Our first tale begins in the cradle of Western civilization, ancient Greece. A landscape of sun-baked stone, olive groves, and philosophical inquiry. The Greeks, as we know, treasured the body. Athleticism was both spiritual and civic. To be strong, nimble, and fast was to honor the gods and one's city. It is little surprise, then, that the Greeks often linked competition with courtship. One of the best-known bride contest stories comes from the region of Thessaly, where, according to legend, noble daughters could be won by foot race. The suitor would run, often alone, while the intended bride stood watching. Some tales suggest she may have set the terms herself, choosing a path through rough terrain or requiring him to carry a token, a symbolic burden. If he succeeded, they would wed. If not, he would be turned away and another man might take his place. In myth, this custom finds echoes in the story of Atalanta, the swift-footed maiden. She vowed never to marry a man who could not outrun her. Many tried, all failed, until Hippomenes, who, with guidance from the goddess Aphrodite, used 3 golden apples to distract her. One by one, he cast them behind him, and she, curious, slowed to retrieve them. This story is often read as a fable of trickery over strength. But in truth, it reflects a deeper tradition, that even contests of marriage were intertwined with divine will and symbolism. It is unlikely that many real women raced their suitors through fields. More common, perhaps, were public tests of strength. Wrestling matches, races in the gymnasium, and even poetic competitions held during festivals. The bride was not entirely passive. Some customs suggest that women could refuse a match if she found the victor unworthy. Others, that her family would take the prize winner into deliberation before the union was sealed. It was a world where reputation, performance, and lineage danced together in complex ceremony. Imagine a village near Delphi, early summer, the air rich with the scent of pine and dust. Men prepare for the contest in silence. A small crowd gathers near a clearing, olive branches woven into their hair. A young woman stands with her mother and aunt, her face half hidden by a linen veil. No music plays, only the wind and distant bleating of goats. A contest begins. The winner will not celebrate. Instead, he will kneel, and the woman may nod quietly or not at all. Let us now shift northward to lands blanketed by snow, pine, and legend. The Norse world, with its sagas and silence, holds many stories, some of them brimming with noise and battle, and others, like ours tonight, almost whispered. In Scandinavia, marriage was deeply tied to alliances, kinship, and property. But among these formal structures, there existed stories, oral and scattered, of contests used to decide suitors. These were not necessarily rituals held in temples, but events that took place during communal gatherings, feasts after harvest, celebrations of victory, or the sacred rites of Yule. Some of the contests were physical. Wrestling was common, with men grappling not just for glory, but for the admiration of onlookers and sometimes for the right to court a particular woman. These were not publicized as bride contests, yet the implication often hung in the air. In the sagas, we hear of men competing with swords and song, their deeds remembered in verse. Others were challenges of wit. In the dim glow of firelit longhouses, stories were told and riddles were exchanged. A man might win a maiden's favor not through strength, but through clever words or a well-timed poem. And yet, the woman's voice was rarely absent. Though these contests might be framed as competitions among men, women were often far from passive. Many had the right to refuse, and some are remembered for turning down every suitor, choosing instead to remain with their kin, to weave, to farm, or to wait for another year. One tale speaks of Phraides, a chieftain's daughter, who watched suitors spar with staffs on the frozen lake. She remained silent through them all, her furs wrapped tightly around her, her gaze steady. Only when a man sang not of conquest, but of winter wind and the ache of longing did she speak. Her voice was soft but decisive. The man did not win through strength, but through the memory he stirred in her. These stories may be colored by legend, shaped by time, but they offer us glimpses into a world where strength alone was not always enough, and where women, even within rigid roles, could wield subtle forms of power. Picture it now. A longhouse filled with laughter and warmth, the scent of roasted meat and pine smoke. A ring cleared in the snow outside. Two men circle each other slowly, their breath rising in the cold air. Inside, a woman watches quietly, her fingers idly weaving threads of wool. She does not speak yet. She waits, not for victory, but for something else. Something she will know only when she sees it. Our journey now carries us eastward to the quiet refinement of Hyanira, Japan. A time of elegant courtly rituals, silk robes, and a reverence for the fleeting. In the imperial capital of Heian-kyo, later known as Kyoto, life among the aristocracy was defined not by warfare or conquest, but by beauty. A carefully arranged branch of plum blossoms, the rustle of a silk sleeve in the wind. A single well-chosen word. It was here, in the shaded corridors of court and garden, that poetry became more than a pastime. It was a currency of thought, a measure of intellect, and at times a form of courtship. Among the nobility, marriage could hinge not just on lineage or alliance, but on the depth of a lover's verse. Waka poetry, with its 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 7 syllabic structure, was exchanged like letters. A suitor might send a poem wrapped delicately in perfumed paper, fastened with a sprig of pine or a ribbon of crimson. The woman, receiving it, would read and reflect. Her reply, if she chose to send one, was also a poem, delicate, restrained, often layered with subtle emotion. If she did not respond, the silence itself was an answer. These exchanges could go on for days, weeks, or even seasons. What we might now call a contest, then, was one of patience, sensitivity, and poetic skill. Tales from the Pillow Book by Sei Shonagon and The Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikibu, both written by women of the court, illustrate how crucial these poetic overtures were. Love, desire, longing, all veiled beneath imagery of misty mountains, cherry blossoms, or autumn leaves. Imagine a courtier pacing beneath moonlight, composing his lines beneath a flowering tree. His robes whisper against the gravel path. The wind stirs the lantern flame. He writes, "Your sleeves were damp with the dew of early dawn. Did you weep? Or did the night mist linger longer than it should?" The woman who receives it may sit by a paper screen, candlelight casting soft shadows on her face. She reads, smiles faintly, and replies. No tears, only the ache of distant footsteps faded in the dark. Your echo lingers where the pine wind once slept. This exchange, this subtle dance of verse, held more weight than any contest of sword or strength. In some cases, an entire marriage might be arranged after an especially moving poetic correspondence. In others, a woman might host several suitors, each sending their verses, each hoping to be the one whose words nestled in her heart. The contest, if it can be called that, lay in who best captured not her attention, but her imagination. These practices were not exclusive to nobles, though they were most elaborate in the upper courts. Among merchants or provincial families, poetry still played a role, albeit simpler. A tanka exchanged during festivals. A handwritten line passed beneath the flap of a kimono sleeve. In all of this, one senses a gentle resistance to blunt pursuit, a preference for nuance, for stillness, for a slow unfolding. Picture it now, a soft rain falls on lacquered rooftops. A paper lantern flickers near a pond where koi drift silently. Inside a private room, a young woman unrolls a scroll, the scent of ink and pine smoke in the air. She reads the poem again, her fingers pausing on a single character, and then she begins to write. The wind over the steppe is constant, a low, restless murmur across the grasses. Here, where the land stretches in every direction uninterrupted by trees or stone, a unique tradition once took place, one that echoes with hooves and laughter, dust and speed. The Mongol bride race. In the vast domains of the Mongol Empire, a culture of horsemanship was central. Children learned to ride before they could walk. Speed, endurance, and agility on horseback were seen not just as noble traits, but as integral to identity itself. It's within this context that we find stories, recorded both in Mongol oral history and foreign accounts, of marriage contests in which the bride was the one to flee, and the suitor the one to give chase. This tradition, known in some regions as the bride chase, allowed a woman to determine the outcome through her own skill. If she did not wish to be caught, she could often outride even the most skilled horseman. If she allowed herself to be caught, the result was equally clear. It was a ritual that held layers of symbolism, freedom, strength, and above all, the idea that the woman had agency within the bounds of custom. Not every bride was willing. Not every suitor succeeded. But the chase itself, its form and outcome, was a public and ceremonial declaration of intent. Imagine a summer morning on the grasslands. The sun still low, a gathering of yurts arranged in a loose crescent. Families stand beside their horses, faces shaded beneath wide-brimmed hats. The bride appears on a chestnut mare, her braid looped in silver thread, a bow slung across her shoulder more for style than use. Her would-be groom, perhaps a childhood friend, rides a few lengths behind, already watching her every movement. A signal is given, a sharp whistle or the raising of a red sash. The bride's horse surges forward and the race begins. Dust kicks up behind her. The suitor follows, urging his horse onward, gauging her path, measuring his chances. But she rides like the wind, leaning low, almost at one with the animal. If she glances back, it's only briefly. The crowd watches silently. This is not a game, not entirely. There is pride at stake, skill, and something more intimate, the wordless communication between two people, shaped by every choice of speed, every feint, every pull of the reins. In some versions, the bride is allowed to strike her pursuer with a whip if he nears too closely. In others, she can choose a route across terrain he may not dare follow. Her path, then, becomes a map of her desire. The symbolism is rich. Unlike the more coercive practices of bride capture in other parts of the world, this ritual, in its ideal form, empowered the woman to flee, to consent, to decide. The Mongol Empire was a tapestry of clans and customs. In some places, this tradition faded under the influence of centralized authority or changing norms. But echoes of it remain in local festivals today, in reenactments that blend pageantry with memory. These races, though not always formally sanctioned, captured something essential. A vision of marriage not as quiet submission nor mere contract, but as a dynamic, even joyful test of mutual capacity. One French envoy to the Mongol court in the 13th century described such a race with fascination, noting that the bride wore brightly colored garments and sang as she rode. The suitor, breathless behind her, never complained of the chase. For him, it was an honor to ride in her wake. Picture it now, the low hills of the steppe turning gold with evening light, the bride's horse cresting a ridge, her figure momentarily silhouetted. Below, the suitor pauses, choosing his line. The only sound is the wind. Whether or not he catches her, the world will continue. But for a moment, this moment, the plains belong to her. Not all histories are told in bold strokes. Not every rebellion is loud. Some are whispers, choices made quietly, but with determination, choices that shift the course of life in ways no scroll or saga can fully capture. In our exploration of bride contests across the world, we've seen women participate through flight, poetry, or observation. But what of those who chose not to engage at all? What of the women who refused to be prizes, and in doing so, became something else entirely? In medieval Europe, particularly between the 11th and 14th centuries, marriages were increasingly tied to property, inheritance, and political strategy. The idea of love was often a luxury. Yet here and there, a subtle shift began to stir, a hesitation, a resistance, documented not in declarations but in quiet actions. Some daughters of nobility sought refuge in the church, choosing the veil of the convent over the veil of marriage. It was not always piety that called them, but the sanctuary of autonomy, a life not bound to a man, but to contemplation, scholarship, or service. Records from English and French abbeys speak of women whose families urged them toward advantageous marriages, only to find their daughters slipping into religious life, citing visions or vows taken in private prayer. Whether those claims were genuine or constructed, the result was the same: a life of their own choosing. In Icelandic sagas, we read of Gudrun Osvafurstatir, who married multiple times but lamented that she never loved any man as much as she loved her independence. Her story, layered with fiction and fact, captures something essential: the voice of a woman speaking not through contest, but reflection. In the cities of Renaissance Italy, some women gained access to education and used it to quietly resist their roles. Letters, diaries, and poems reveal an undercurrent of critique, a longing not for a better husband, but for a life where marriage was not compulsory. Even among peasant communities where options were far fewer, choices were still made. A woman might delay marriage. She might engage in prolonged courtship, rejecting one suitor after another. Sometimes, entire communities gossiped about such women, calling them proud or cursed, but still, they endured. These refusals, these deferrals, were not contests in the traditional sense. They lacked pageantry, but they were, in many ways, more courageous. For to defy expectation without spectacle is often the bravest act of all. Picture now a stone cottage in a misted valley. A woman kneels at the hearth, her face calm. Her mother sighs, urging her to consider the man from the next farm. He has oxen, land, a strong back, but she shakes her head. Not yet, she says, or maybe she says nothing at all, and that silence, her own, is the answer. Or imagine a young noblewoman writing by candlelight. Her poem is never published, but in it she writes, "Better the cold of cloistered walls slash than the fire of a hearth not mine." These are the quiet rebellions, hidden in plain sight. They remind us that history is not only made by kings, nor by contests. It is made in kitchens, in corners, in choices repeated across generations. So now we draw the thread closed. We have wandered gently across centuries and continents, touching lives woven long before our own, stories of marriage, contest, and choice. But beneath every custom, every ritual, we have found something deeper. The quiet, persistent question of agency. Whether in the form of a race across the plains, a stanza written in moonlight, or the silent act of refusal, the women in these stories have left echoes. Faint, perhaps, but enduring. These tales remind us that even within the most elaborate or constrained traditions, there is room for subtle shaping, for presence, for participation. The contest, so often framed around the winning of a bride, becomes something else entirely when viewed through her eyes. As you rest now, perhaps already drifting toward sleep, let your mind carry the softness of this history with you, not as noise or spectacle, but as texture. The feel of woven linen, the smell of ink on parchment, the hush of wind over distant steps. Somewhere, someone once stood quietly beneath a tree, listening to suitors call her name. Somewhere else, a rider slowed her pace so that he might catch up. And somewhere, perhaps in a room much like your own, a woman picked up a pen and began to write herself free. These are not fairy tales, nor are they always happy endings. They are, instead, what history so often is: complex, layered, human. And in remembering them gently, we honor not only the facts, but the lives. Not only the outcomes, but the questions. Thank you for traveling here through dust and parchment, through language and silence. May you sleep well and dream deeply of distant fields, of slow races, and of forgotten names that once meant everything.